As you all know, this has been a crazy year for me. It started last June when my marriage fell apart for the last time, and then from that moment forward, I feel like I've been just flying. There was the trademark issue in the fall, and I did the conference in the spring. But in between all of this, I have been working on my curriculum, and I've been building the back end of my business. And one of the things that was really important to me, because I am creating a certification, was to try and get a lay of the land in a sense of, who else was out there and what are they doing? Because I've always viewed it as a continuum. Baby wearing is a continuum, it's a wheel, and I am just one of the spokes and one of the perspectives on this wheel, and it will continue after me just as it has continued before me. And when I was at the conference last year in July 2014 in Arizona, I had an offhand comment made to me by the Chief Science Officer of Ergo Baby, Dr. Henrik Norholt, and he said that we are going to be tackling the schools this year instead of what we've been doing so far. And I'm like, tackling the schools? I'm like, I want to be a school. How do I find out about this we, and where do I get the information, and how do I become one of these we? Because I was really, really curious. I knew what I was building. I mean, I hadn't announced it to the world at that point. A few people knew, like Joanna McNeely and other people here and there. So I started networking, not just for that, but I wanted to know if I could get more information. So I networked through the fall and into early winter, and I was finally lucky enough to be added to this initiative, which was a private forum on Facebook with IBCICC as the title, and IBCICC stands for International Board Certified Infant Carrying Consultant. And what they're attempting to do is create a certification for carrying consultants in a medical model that is equivalent to an IBCLC. I always get those initials wrong. I apologize. And so I got into the group, and one of the first things I did is I read through the mission statement. I saw who was on the task force, and I started reading through everyone's comments. Initially, we were supposed to get like a question a week, and we were supposed to have covered a whole bunch of stuff, because from the beginning of my introduction to the group, there was always going to be a meeting in Antwerp at the conference there, the first Flemish baby wearing conference. And I had been hearing about this conference all the way back in the fall from my friend Katie, who I had met in Washington, D.C. at the 2012 conference there. And I had been getting like little pushes, oh, you should go, you should go, you should go. And then when I found out about this initiative, and I found out there was going to be a whole meeting directed around this initiative, I'm like, damn right I'm going. Why wouldn't I go? And so by February, March, I had organized myself to be able to get there. And it was really interesting because it started with such verve and then such participation, and then everything kind of fell off. And just slightly before the meeting, they presented an agenda, and the agenda shifted everything from a conversation of looking at potential to looking at actually bringing it into physical being. And so I started reaching out to people, and I started reaching out to people whose comments had intrigued me on the forum. And of course, I'm a pretty skeptical person, and I reached out to those people first, and I also reached out to the French first because I have a particular liking for them as well. And my questions were, so what do you think? And are you going to go to Antwerp, and what's your perspective on this? And eventually we got down to the meat of the matter, with a few jokes tossed in between about, rap divorces and whatever else. And I said, well, Ergo has invited us to the dance. It's up to us whether we take the floor or if we decide to change the music. And that really resonated with some of the people that I was talking with. And with others, they kind of were taken aback, and they're like, why do you keep saying Ergo? And I was like, what do you mean? This started with Ergo Baby's Chief Science Officer. And they're like, oh, no, it's just his little project. Like, did you just neuter him? Because from my perspective, when you have a company representative who's been involved in pulling people together for upwards of 2 years, it's not a little project. And he's doing this on behalf of his company. And so I thought that was interesting. And so anyhow, the conversations continued, and you know, he was the only industry, he is still the only industry representative in this group at this moment. And so we entered into the room in Antwerp, and I would say that the meeting went rather well. I mean, the agenda was crazy. The agenda basically took maybe and potential and moved it into the concrete, because a lot of the questions were, you know, how many hours would you think they would be needing, and what kind of science should we look at, and what kind of things should we be tackling under this initiative outside of the first few discussion points. And it was very concrete, very, very concrete, and almost like we were kind of being pushed. And so the meeting from my perspective was great. I was in a room with over 20 women, 20 strong, intelligent women who had concrete ideas on what they wanted and how they viewed the world and their perspective in this whole industry. And it was the first time that I felt, wow, you know, this is fantastic. Because when you're toiling at this at home, you tend to lose some perspective. And so after the meeting, we were promised a follow-up. And we were promised two sorts of follow-ups. One, you know, meeting minutes and everything that had occurred would be posted. And secondly, that we would continue to the discussion in Antwerp. And that never happened. It didn't happen at all. And so about 2 weeks, roughly, prior to the British conference, and I had started planning to get to the British conference, I would say in late March. I just had to organize certain things and to pull them together and hope that all of my ducks landed where I needed them to in order to make it there. And I had, by early June, I had everything in line. I had my lodging booked, I had my flight, I had purchased a ticket to the conference, and all of a sudden, in the forum for IBCICC, where an announcement was made saying, this is what we're doing, and we've gotten these priorities, and it's going to be this, and this, and bam, I was like, whoa, dudes, we don't even have a mission statement. We don't even have membership fees or membership rules or anything to define a structure to justify a concrete way forward. And some of the things that were suggested, like a multi-level campaign using the visible and kissable, and potentially putting up a booth at the conference to discuss this initiative, required money and resources, and to promote something that didn't even have set goals, to promote something that didn't even have a mission statement. And I was like, back up the truck. Back up the truck. And so a lot of us were like, where is this push coming from? Why is there such a hurry? And I actually found it really hard. I found it really hard because, I mean, I knew industry was behind it, but all of the meetings to decide these goals had basically only occurred between 2 to 3 people, and one of those people was always the Chief Science Officer of Ergo. And we're like, okay, why are we being pushed so hard? And we get to the night before the conference. The night before the conference, he announces that we are going to have meetings open to the public on this initiative, and that we were going to be sharing everything, and that it was going to be explained to everyone. And I immediately got on the computer. I was like, where is this coming from? And why? And why is this announcement occurring? And what does it mean? We don't have anything to announce. What is he doing? It was so premature. So premature. But that's the thing, right? when you're working for a company and they've allowed you leeway to work on this project, the project needs to have a purpose, and the project needs to have an end game, and the end game was to put us into a position to create it. And so we were there, and we had some very public meetings with people who had been part of the process longer than I, and then members of the public who came in, and we kind of, hit it really hard. I mean, I remember being in line to get registered for the conference itself, and I was panicking. I mean, oh my God, what on earth had I done? What on earth had I done to spend that much money when things are so tight here, to go to Britain, to be manipulated and pushed by a multi-billion-dollar multinational company representative? And so Nora from the Swiss school and her co-worker, Yasmin, pulled me off to the side, and we sat down, and she's like, Deborah, this is what we're going to do. I agree with you. Don't. When it came time for Henrik's presentation, we were sitting midway back in the audience. We moved up to the front because we didn't want to misunderstand any part of his announcement. In retrospect, it must have been really funny, these very determined women moving up to the front row, all as one group, and like sitting down with their pens and papers very seriously, like, we're watching you. And so when it came to the first meeting, which occurred over lunch, we aired our concerns. I mean, in order for this to be a legitimate process, we need to make sure that everyone's roles are clearly defined, and that we can trust one another, and that we can work in a space that is going to create something that is legitimate. And to have someone from a company have so much influence on every single aspect of this was going to completely circumvent that. And as a result of our being there, and Nora's very eloquent, and she carried the lead on this. Basically, we got prioritized, the creation of conflict of interest. We got prioritized creation of a code of ethics, because everyone needs to declare their interests, and everyone needs to declare where they stand, so that then we can determine what is the best role for them through the membership rules and through the voting rules. And so from that point forward, each and every other meeting was essentially a reiteration of the first two, explaining what the initiative was about, the goals that had been set to that point, and including the changes that we'd brought in. At this point, we are now looking at the creation of working groups and of establishing, who's going to be doing what, and how it's all going to roll out. And I'm interested in continuing and hoping to build something really strong. And now that we've had Ergo representative issue a statement saying, I'm only going to be involved in this aspect of the curriculum building, everything else is up to you, I feel that in order to add extra legitimacy to the whole entire process, we need to let in other manufacturers, particularly those who have also developed their own networks, because their points of view will need to be taken into account once we start working on the curriculum that touches on their carrier style. We as educators have our own points of view, and we don't deal with the global, we work with the individual, but we still need to respect whatever product limitations there are in place, and who better than the people who built those products. And we need to make sure that if we're going to work towards a statement on something like hip dysplasia, that we are not doing it to favor one brand and the carrier that they have created and the limited position that that carrier offers. We can't box ourselves in that way. And so, you know, it has been an interesting ride. And so that's why I went to Europe twice this spring to go to 2 conferences. And it wasn't so much about speakers, although they were great. It was about the creation of this initiative. And I feel blessed in some ways. I have met some fantastic women, some really good, strong, intelligent women, and I look forward to working with them to create something strong and cohesive under this IBCICC initiative. Something hopefully lasting. Anyhow, so that's what I've been up to. I hope you stick around and see what else is coming down the pike. I am working on the curriculum still, and there'll be more news coming about that in the fall.